Okay, welcome everybody to what are we, week 8, workshop 8 with Brand Catalyzer. We've got Jenny Lynn today, and I think we've been learning about all of the different platforms that you can use, social media platforms and e-commerce. And today we're about to learn how to effectively work a marketing strategy with all these platforms. So I will hand over to Jenny, who's going to take us through the workshop. And as usual, this will be recorded and we'll share it with all of the people that have registered to watch later. And we also have a copy of these presentations. So if anyone would like one, then please drop me an email. My name is Kate Criven for anyone that hasn't met me, and I can share the presentation with you. So thank you, Jenny. I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Kate. And just to check everyone can see my screen.
We can.
Perfect. Oh, thank you, Kate. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome back again to our China market webinar series on navigating the e-commerce and social media landscapes. And to introduce myself to those who haven't met me before, I'm Jenny, account manager from Brand Catalyzer, supporting on this series. And we are a leading independent go-to marketing and consulting agency hybrid, specializing in providing cross-border distribution and cross-cultural marketing solutions for China and Southeast Asian markets. The go-to market supports that we have been providing our brands and wine brands as well can really come from two aspects: distribution or marketing. So whether you're in a pre-entry phase or you have your sales channels in place, we provide a comprehensive suite of solutions to really support your China market strategy. So if you are ever interested to explore any of these solutions further, never hesitate to reach out to Christy or myself. Last week, Christy touched on the distribution side of strategy, on how you can select the right e-commerce distributor for the China market. This week in workshop 8, we also look at all the kind of social media channels, as Kate has mentioned previously in the series, and look at how to develop a marketing strategy on how you could really boost e-commerce sales from online and offline, out platform and in platform. And today's session may sound a bit theoretical, but from conversations that we've kind of had with a few wine brands, we have received questions on that strategy side of things for their re-entry, and also brands who really may reconsider how they want to be positioned in market. So the strategic angles we share today hopefully provide some direction or structure for you, especially if you are still in your kind of planning stages and need something to start with. Now, in terms of forming your go-to market strategy, each brand may take a different approach to this, but we always recommend starting off with two foundational components: an internal situational audit and phased market entry strategy. The situational audit is all about understanding where your brand or business currently stands and where we aim to go. So we ask ourselves questions like, where am I now? What resources or assets do I currently have? Where do I want to be? What are the goals that I want to achieve in the China market? And what do I need to achieve these goals? So what are the resources or assets that we may not currently have, but we do need to achieve this? And by answering these questions, we are really setting a clear baseline for our strategy. And the insights from this audit will help in 3 key ways. So first is we will make smarter, more informed choices as we move forward, and we'll be able to identify areas where we are strong and where we may need that additional resource or adjustment. And that's about knowing our strengths and weaknesses, which will help us prioritize and allocate our resources and the budgeting effectively. But once we understand a starting point of where we are, it's then crucial to break down our market entry into manageable phases. So this approach allows us to really set smaller, achievable milestones that steadily work towards our ultimate goals. And with a phased approach, we're able to test and adjust our strategy with each stage, and that reduces the risks and minimize any costly areas we may experience. And by following such approach, we do establish a structured path into market and gradually increasing our brand presence and influence. And with these foundations in place, we can then focus on building the main components of our marketing strategy. So, apart from the third or fourth component, which is generally put together from your side as a brand or with distributors, I will walk through how we could make use of the other components to create a strategy that is both impactful and adaptable to China's unique landscape. But before strategy, I'd just like to give an example of how we could map out our foundations, starting with the situational audit. So, key components, brands you could generally look at include mapping your current sales channels in market. So, how are we selling offline, on or off trade, and are we selling online through maybe a distributor or partnering retailer? And in seeing this, you then be able to understand your objectives on maybe how you want to expand your sales channel, which generally starts with seeking, that suitable or new distributors at either a regional or national level. So here are some questions that may help you and you may ask is, what is current feedback you're receiving from your distributor? And what are challenges that distributors face when they are selling your products? So asking these questions to your existing distributors will help us gauge how well our product is being received, but also understand the pain points from a selling point of view to really identify how we as a brand can make it easier for distributors to represent the brand. And towards new distributors, then it's about assessing how we can demonstrate the sales potential of our products. Here, really being able to showcase a brand's social voice, such as like your online presence, can be a very powerful tool to showcase this type of demand and credibility of your brand. And then from a product range perspective, we can decide on which brands or products that we would want to bring to the China market, and then really think about how they want to be positioned for market entry. And some guiding questions here will include like, is our current brand name suitable for the market? Does it resonate with the local audience? And are we really supporting it with the right brand story? And maybe for those with multiple brands within your portfolio, is understanding what makes each brand or winery unique, because identifying these differentiators is really crucial for that effective positioning, and it's about not confusing the consumer or even the distributors in market who are buying or selling your product. Then also, particularly for the China market, is what is our hero product? By highlighting a key product in a brand that can represent your brand can really help to serve as the focal point for your market entry strategy, and also helps to give consumers focus. And then lastly is then assessing your current marketing resources and capabilities. So what channels have we used at home currently or in market? And what existing assets do we have that are transferable? And in making entry into a market, our goal here is with marketing to really build that brand presence and then establish greater stakeholder confidence for their reasons to believe in engaging, buying a product, or just partnering with your brand. And that's really about understanding who your current and potential consumers are and what social platforms, sales channels they are using to then assess how you can get your brand noticed on these channels. And then moving to your phased market entry roadmap, this is an example of two initial phases you may have to support your market entry. So first, localized branding is followed then by localized marketing, which generally we are trying to really impact two of our key stakeholders, being the consumers and distributors. Our initial phase is all about creating a strong localized branding, and the goal here is to introduce our brand in a way that resonates with Chinese consumers and builds a foundation of familiarity and relevance. So really that branding in a localized way acts as establishing brand cues for consumers, like visual cues, and then providing a clear guidance for distributors. And so by the end of phase one, the desired outcome here is to have a brand that is both recognizable and favorable, with distributors also can feel equipped that they can be able to represent a brand effectively. And so once we establish a localized brand identity in phase one, we could move on to phase two, which is about local marketing. And this phase focuses on strengthening our brand's market presence and building trust with both consumers and distributors. So what can be done here by increasing the social evidence and accessibility of a brand, which does need to be accompanied with the partnership support that you give to your distributors as well to be able to help them sell the product. What we can do in these two phases, I will touch on the following section. But before I do, just want to come back to two key trends for the China market. And we think this is particularly relevant for our workshop series in general, and to also consider when you are looking for distribution partners in market and looking at your marketing strategy as a whole. So the first trend is the e-commerce growth, whether it's the adoption amongst other categories or it's the consumer demand for online transactions. There is a mismatch in the wine category between the most used sales channels and the most preferred sales channel for wine purchases. So with this mismatch, we may foresee that the shift in the sales of wine to maybe slowly increase towards the online platforms, especially if we're looking at the younger demographics. And the second is the influence of social media. So whether we are trying to drive sales online or offline, it is without doubt that social media is crucial to influencing shopping behaviors, and consumers tend to follow a typical shopping path of, they search for products, look at reviews, they interact with brands, and then they maybe make purchase and evaluate the purchase decisions, but they hop from one platform to another, and that's when social media becomes a key tool for such behaviors. So from this perspective, brands are more so taking an omni-channel marketing strategy, and whether that's through you or your distributors, but it's thinking about how you can capture as many online and offline touch points, but then maybe also integrate them so the experience and messaging is being received in a consistent manner. And now if we look into breaking down the actions in our phases, we'll start with phase one, which is about local branding and positioning. So how can we localize our brand so it's better understood and received by Chinese consumers? This extent of your adaptation of your brand, whether it's a simple translation, a targeted adjustment, or a major adaptation, it will really depend on how you want your brand to sit within the market and assessing whether your brand is competitive as well for the market. So from a strategic angle, how we can determine this, we do recommend taking this 2 to 3 step approach to local branding. So starting with step one is market research, is to look at where do we sit. In this initial phase, we're focusing on understanding the market landscape and determining our position within it. So it's very essential that we are, when we are shaping our brand's localization approach, is knowing whether this approach is right for us or right for the market. Components of the market research will include market outlook, which is having a broad understanding of the market as a whole, such as identifying the cultural or emerging trends. You would want to conduct a wine consumer analysis, so looking at the different segment types and to define your target segments and map out their behaviors and preferences with wine, and then using social listening to capture consumer sentiment and discussions around wine, the category, as well as your brand and competitors on the Chinese social media platforms, particularly when nowadays things are moving so fast, so many campaigns are happening, you just want to keep on top of what's happening. And so you would perform a competitor analysis quite commonly and frequently to understand also their pricing and unique selling points of those that are also already in market. And then with that, you would want to identify your core competencies and where your opportunities lie as a brand and determine where your strengths are, and then try to align these with the potential areas for localization and market entry. So having this research not only is about informing your overall brand strategy, but it also supports your strategic planning, provides insights also for new product development moving forward. And it can really vary in depth, but I guess the takeaway is to ensure there's some level of research which is being done. So even joining our webinar series and learning insights from us provides you a level of information that hopefully gives you validation or guidance on how your brand may fit into the wider China market. And step 2 is then your brand strategy. So should we stick to the current strategy or maybe take a new direction? Once we do have an understanding of the market as a whole, we could then move on to defining or even refining our brand strategy. And that's where we decide how we want our brand to be perceived and heard. So in this step, we are working on developing the brand cues for customers, providing guidance for distributors and partners. So we will want to at least provide a Chinese version of your brand introduction, covering things like, the who we are, core values, brand mission, slogans, taglines, but then also to establish branding guidelines such as your logo, your typography, the visuals, how things will look, the color palettes, and then the guidelines in your visuals for both digital and print applications. So these could really follow your existing guidelines and then making adaptations to make fit with the consumer tastes and also the language preferences. But these really serve as a resource for both internal and external stakeholders, ensuring that consistent communication and experience is being made or have given across all channels in China, but also consistent with what's being branded globally to really help increase that brand recognition and recall. Step 3 then, which is just as important as step 2, which we talk about the consumer, it's about who do we speak to. So the final step focuses on targeting the right audience and crafting our communication strategy, such as how we tailor the messaging and the unique selling points of our particular products. Here, based on our products, market research and selling price, we'll identify the target audience segments based on, their demographics, psychographic, behavioral, and their interest-based profiling. And with this understanding, you would then develop your communication strategy in a way that resonates with these audiences, but also aligns with your brand values. And by finding a focus on your audience, that hopefully then helps guide your decision-making on channel selection, as well as potential partnership opportunities that you look for. And so that's because we want to ensure that we are reaching and engaging our target consumers effectively. So in step 1, we talked about the different components we could look into for market research. So from consumers, competitors, to the market as a whole. In terms of where to look for resources, Wine Victoria, that offers a lot of useful resources, including this workshop. And you can access their export dashboards and their market insights bulletin as well to give you some statistics and updates on the market. There are also other resources out there, including alcohol, wine industry research data, and insights providers, including the IWSR, which is more of a global statistics platform. There's 36KR, which is more localized Chinese research, which looks at more of the consumer and behavioral insights. And then there's II Media Research, which is another domestic Chinese resource that looks at a lot of the business models and reports alcohol statistics for the market. So these are some credible resources in the industry that you could look to. For social platforms, they also release their own monthly, quarterly, and annual reports as well, which typically breaks down the content trends, category shifts, so the different categories of content, as well as the consumer and user analysis, as well as usage of the platform. So this will be great for informing your content strategy, for example, your communication strategy. And then there's also the e-commerce platforms. So major e-commerce platforms, they also have many of these annual, quarterly, monthly reports, and these are great to just help you track overall sales performance of categories as a whole, and also consumer preferences towards like different campaigns as well. In step 2, we mentioned about establishing the clear brand cues for consumers and providing guidance for distributors. And so here, your brand localization strategy is then focused on how to make your brand visually aesthetic, recognizable, distinct, and favorable to the Chinese consumer. So here's just a checklist of some things you may want to prepare for. The brand name and logo, that's not necessarily changing your DNA, but just probably thinking of if there's a relevant or suitable Chinese name, or even a nickname that can be more easily remembered by audiences. And that's usually quite important to facilitate a brand recall. And also because Chinese characters, they are structured very differently. So the typography and color palettes do also need to be catered for the cultural taste. And from a guideline point of view, I imagine that brands without a permanent Chinese team member to produce all your content and creatives, you will need to put together a key visual guideline on how your materials and content should look across channels, whether offline or online. And maybe having a creative agency or in-house team put this together can help you save time on aligning with in-market partners down the track. Communication costs as well, and branding consistency, that can all really be improved as well for effective marketing. And then step 3, we talked about profiling your target consumer group. So when you are choosing your focus target segment, you will need to make sure the group is accessible. So in that you can reach them, communicate to them through social platforms, or be able to sell to them through your sales channels. So your group needs to be relevant to your product. So this consumer could show potential interest in what you are selling or trying to communicate. And they also should be valuable. So consumers can be valuable if they may present a greater population, or if they are a group that you potentially see will achieve more sales with, even if they are a less populated but a targeted group. So here is an example of 2 segment groups, being your wine enthusiasts and novice explorers. So many wine brands, they tend to target wine enthusiast groups who are more likely to deliver that great value. However, many consumers within the Chinese market, especially over the more recent years, they tend to belong to this group. So the novice explorers who have more limited knowledge, and have greater need for things like shareability, accessibility, and affordability, in a comparison to those enthusiasts who look for and appreciate quality choices and wine choices, and immersive experiences. So identifying who your core consumers are, the main audience of focus, is important to influence how you want to shape your messaging, your communication strategy, as well as the marketing and sales channels that you choose to activate. So this slide, we recap the 2 key wine consumer trends from earlier in the webinar series. First is the rising she economy, where there's the growing demand from female wine drinkers who also span a greater age range. And then most importantly, trend 2, prevalence of that young Gen Z wine drinker who are drinking smaller amounts, but in higher frequencies. And they typically seek for more convenience, affordable options with greater shareability. And so that relates to the early trend recap on the importance of e-commerce and social media, which is really due to this rising consumer group. Not only for the wine category, actually, but also other consumer good categories in China. So maybe you will align your brand with a segment that's more suitable for your product, but really assess where the synergies may lie in your portfolio, and with what's happening in the China market. Next, we bring us to phase 2, local marketing. So how can we plan a marketing strategy, a roadmap to appeal to the China market? I want to start with sharing a suggested pathway on how you could approach marketing channel selection and which touch points to potentially activate depending on your marketing budget. And so here we've broken down a pathway. So you can see this as the phased market entry, but we've broken this down, this marketing, into 3 stages. So mainly looking at the primary route as the standard, or maybe we can say a baseline starting point. So in stage 1, the focus is on building that brand presence. So we provided a standard activation suggestion covering the key tools that we feel that brands should leverage. So Red Owned Media is a great first step for building initial presence. One being its overall demographic is highly relevant to Victorian wines. And that second is the content is easily accessible and easier to curate as opposed to the Douyin videos or WeChat articles as well. Search ads are the suggested paid ad type to invest in, being that it's probably more worthwhile to target those with some intention towards their platform usage than those who are just freely browsing the platform, especially if you are working with a limited budget. Then there's influencer marketing. So Red being your primary channel, you can then leverage influencers to drive awareness and traffic. Douyin may be relevant if you have distributors there or if you want to promote on or off trade channels as well. In stage 2, that's when your brand is probably wanting to make a more official brand entry and you may already have a few partners in place. So here is when you may want to involve more offline activations such as pop-ups, maybe VIP dinners or trade tasting events to have more physical activation in market. And combined with the existing activities that you may have in stage 1, you then add on the additional in-feed investment ads to promote awareness of your activation events, as an example, something you could potentially do, which helps create more discussion around your brand, particularly when there's the local activity evidence and the kind of content that you can showcase, and it's not just a branding and very general kind of post. And then to stage 3, once your channels do become more stabilized and maybe you have more confidence in your operations and your resources at hand, is then you may want to involve WeChat into your own media channel. So when you have the customer service working capacity to manage a Chinese speaking community and consumers. And maybe then you also want to increase the frequency of your offline activations and increase paid ad investment across social media to try to grow the brand as well. So in addition to the primary route here, we have a nice to have optional touch points that you can include in your strategy as well, such as the PR, road shows and campaign-based activations. So it will depend on your budget and resources at hand to see what pathway best works for your brand. And now if we look at each of the suggested pathways, owned social media is the first channel that we tend to look at. So apart from choosing your channel, you will start planning the content that you want to post, such as breaking down your content pillars and looking into the type of assets that you have ready at hand that will help provide some direction. And from a language and content creation point of view, some actions that you may take as a brand or seek an agency maybe to support you on may include creating monthly or even yearly content, more like creating a monthly content plan based on maybe a yearly calendar of activities that you may have during the year, but ensuring that you have a consistent flow of content to effectively build brand presence. So you want to be consistent in your efforts, especially if you're having key business goals or certain activations in place. And then to adapt existing assets and actually write and create Chinese content back from your plan for your audience out there is key. And then B, then reviewing your performance of your content and seeing how you can then improve the content you're putting out there will help keep your brand stay up to date. And also you want to be able to respond to community feedback or questions in a timely manner. That will help keep your brand active and engaging for its audience. So thinking about when you can post content, if you have anyone in place who can manage and optimize your content as well, is just as important. Your paid media will be a combination of content strategy and your paid advertising strategy. So you first create the quality content either from your brand owned account or from influencers' accounts. So which you then boost to either the feeds or search pages within platforms. So this concept was mainly brought about by Red, but it's also applicable to Douyin. And we mentioned in previous sessions that feed advertising is about increasing the brand visibility and recall through targeting a particular audience, whereas search is about influencing the search behavior and purchase decisions through keyword targeting. And that's to strengthen a brand's impression when associated with particular keywords. And then we can really see content is the build up of the social proof, while the paid ads distribute it to a wider audience, expediting the purchase funnel and also the consumer decision-making process. And here we showcase a potential audience pathway when they come across an ad marked as an ad post in either in-feed or search placements, which bring audience to a post or video where a call to action button could be present, and then direct audiences to the relevant landing pages and so on. So we've covered the different ad types in previous workshops, so I won't go into depth here. But here, influencer marketing as part of your strategy, we mentioned it's about maximizing exposure of your brand, but also providing more authentic content that can take various forms. So whether it's storytelling your brand, showcasing a usage scenario, sharing their experience maybe from an offline activation, or promoting a sales offer, you can really engage with different categories of influencers to share different types of content. And previously we had touched on in our red that, we do have, the lifestyle travel categories, which are always really relevant to engage with. You might think they're not directly related to wine, but they're probably your best channel to actually speak to the wider and more broader range of consumers out there. So being able to combine these different categories, with our wine experts, but also the wine enthusiasts, becomes just as important to just kind of give a more real life and authentic touch to your brand. And next week's workshop, we will cover how you can form your KOL, KOC influencer strategy. So we will cover more of this next week. We also talked about live streaming during our Douyin workshop, and if you or your distributors ever have the capability to activate this is a great touch point to maximize engagement with your audience and really get the potential consumers to experience and interact with your brand and products in a very kind of real-time way. And while it's predominantly used for selling product, more recently, it's been used for branding purposes and educational purposes where people just kind of showcase an experience and something maybe you could think about as a nice to have action that, if you are engaging influencers who are doing maybe a more daily live streaming vlog, that maybe you could somehow partner with them in that kind of soft selling manner, because that's become more of a way that consumers in China are trying to kind of stay in touch with influencers that they are interested in. Another action that we've included as nice to have is if you have capacity to engage in in-market PR, having both that mass media and trade media coverage really help play a complementary role. So you would engage mass media for more wider reach, to reach a larger audiences, because that really helps build the brand visibility in kind of a short amount of time. But you also then help to enhance and build your brand image, because you are engaging more mass media, but hopefully reputable as well, that have a premium, trustworthy image that maybe aligns with the brand image you're trying to portray. But also, mass media just allows you to provide more diversified touch points and kind of get and reach out to consumers who may be just exposed to and kind of used to having multiple sources of information. And obviously, trade media is always very important, and that's being a very industry and professional specific publishers. So you always could engage with, the winery trade websites, the newsletters, different publications with like the exhibitions or organizations. But this really helps with the position targeting. I imagine if you want to be reaching directly to those wine lovers, wine consumers, trade media is always probably the most suitable way, and it helps bring a high credibility also to your brand, being endorsed by such organizations. And also the level of depth that you can go with trade media is also deeper, because if you are wanting to talk more about educational content about your wine, your winery, trade media is probably the best way to kind of deliver that information, while mass media is a bit more on the kind of surface level, and it's about kind of just the brand in general, and then maybe certain activations that you have been participating in, and that's more just for a general brand awareness. So having kind of these two ways of PR can be embedded in your strategy, and something you can think about as well. So these usually, if you don't have the resources to engage with this media, that's when maybe if you have any connections, your distributors in market, if they already have any partners, always worth to work with them. Or you can always find agencies and PR agencies who are actually very experienced and have that greater connection and network to help you find the right media publication for you, because there's such a big range of media publication, particularly in China, which varies kind of region to region as well. And then inbound for meals, another lovely, nice to have initiative that we always like to bring. We always recommend to our winery brands as well, but it's a great initiative to have to be able to bring across, Chinese influencers, any industry experts, or even relevant media to really participate in an immersive brand winery experience. And, there's so many benefits to having this type of activation. It's great for content creation, and word of mouth from the experience. It's like, traveling to somewhere amazing. Someone comes back and tells everyone about the amazing trip that they had or experience they had at this winery. So like the Wine Victoria Famille, there are different ways you can really participate in programs or even run your own if you have the capability. It's something that you or your partnering agencies and distributors may be able to support with, because there are different actions and things in place, such as you do have to find the right relevant profiles and people to bring to your wineries. And there's a lot of kind of that coordination of the operational aspects of how to plan your trips, and how to get them here really from China to Australia. And also on site, there's a lot of actions that you can do and ways you can engage them, from the very beginning of how you create your wines to how you taste them, and how you enjoy them in general, and then always the post experience, of what they can do with all that experience and content. And you never want to kind of go to waste on the opportunities for content creation, and also opportunities to get feedback and reviews from these experiences, because these are always the best ways that you can get people to participate in surveys and really give you that quality feedback on how you can improve as well.
Jenny, I was just going to jump in on that KOL inbound. And something we've been looking at with Wine Victoria with Brand Catalyzer is actually some of those Melbourne-based Chinese KOLs. So you can actually get people over to your winery without having to invest in that long haul flight.
Yes,
Something else
absolutely.
to add.
And actually, that's very correct because a lot of kind of consumers in China, they look to what's the local Chinese doing in Australia. They look to their experiences to kind of even trigger their own kind of intention of maybe I can travel over or even just try to find the same product or experience in market. So like you said, that's always a great way to engage as well, because there are a lot of wine drinkers, I'd say, in Australia over here, especially Chinese consumers who have learnt about that wine culture here, which is very different from what they probably experiences back in China. And having that firsthand experiences actually helps them become maybe quite an effective kind of way that they can deliver the messaging in a more convincing manner as well. So that's definitely something that's always great to explore. And so, yes, in covering the overall marketing strategy and all the different tools you can have in place, I also wanted to share how brands could potentially tie it together. So, how you can capture that O2O experience that Chinese consumers are experiencing. So, O2O meaning online to offline, offline to online, or even online to online, which, for example, can be connecting social media to e-commerce channels. So consumers, they will come across your brand either through, online presence your brand may have, and that is via the content sharing or e-commerce channels that you may have in place or that other people have shared online. They may engage with online platforms to search for or share their own reviews, make particular commentary, share social media posts regarding your brand or product, and with which they can then also make the online orders or make payments. So you can imagine that, if you had, let's say, the KOLs inbound to attend your Infomil trips over here, and then maybe Chinese consumers overseas, they are assessing your brand content through these KOLs who are posting content in China, then they are having that interaction kind of through that virtual experience, but they can still actually move through the funnel, we say the sales marketing funnel, and kind of move through and maybe potentially take certain actions as well. But then from an offline perspective, consumers, they will be able to interact with your brand or products through retail store pop-ups, event activations that maybe you participate in. They may also experience, taste test your products on or off trades in store, and of course make purchases as well. So similarly, just as you would hopefully want to have them experience it in China market or in your local market, there's different ways you can get them to interact with you offline. So there's always ways you can somehow make the offline interaction still be worthwhile and spread across to kind of the broader globe and consumers across borders as well. But ways that Chinese consumers may experience that O2O in the wine industry is about how the integration of certain functions of that online and offline can occur with each other. So depending on your resources or sales channels that you have in place, but majority of the action typically tries to keep payments, appointment bookings online, while having the product and brand experience offline. So maybe a common example is you have an in-store pop-up happening and you use your online channels to promote and drive registrations for participation in the offline event. And then in-store, you may prompt visitors and participants to complete a particular action online, such as follow your social accounts or complete a taste testing feedback survey, and so on. So this type of integration is a cost-effective approach in that it does allow you as a brand to better track the data that you get and also engagement as well, not only for you to assess the impact, but also generate leads for future marketing purposes. And lastly, just a quick brand case to look into is this Spanish brand Knock Knock from Ireland Wine Chateau. So this brand has been able to build a China team of their own in market over the years and has probably the most comprehensive digital social channels and the integrated e-commerce. It has used each channel to showcase the same kind of visual and experience of that fairy tale product theme with a little Red Riding Hood figure visual that transforms into a wolf. That's the key visual that they go with. But we see in their content sharing and visuals across all channels, whether it's through KOL or their own content, kind of the vibe they're going for. It takes a very young but nostalgic twist to marketing, which is something that's quite refreshing, I guess, for the Chinese consumer as well. But I guess how they've integrated their offline and online include how it's promotion of an offline party to the social media pre-event through the content sharing, brand collaborations, and enticing audiences with exclusive deals. And then to post-event, they amplify the event experience through influencer marketing, which may also be accompanied with certain special online deals that you have for online audiences that they can also make use of. So this example is commonly replicated across different campaigns we see in market. So really making sure how you can make use of all touch points, both online and offline, to maximize exposure and reach that where possible, so none of your marketing efforts do go to waste. So that brings me to the end actually of my session, and where really I want to remind that really any start is a good start. So taking a first step and start getting really engaged with the China market in whatever way possible is always great. And never be afraid to reach out if you're interested to chat about how to make that first step or you do need that support, but always welcome to reach out to Wine Victoria team or us at Brand Catalyzer. So next week, I will be back to walk you through how to open the main accounts that we've covered in the series, as well as share the best practice in forming your influencer strategy. So thank you for joining us today and hopefully see you next week.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jenny. As always, super useful, interesting, and relevant information. And I think, we all have our social media accounts in Australia. You wouldn't go without a website, probably a Facebook page, an Instagram page. So I think getting onto Red and Doyen, I think is a must for brands now. So thank you for talking us through how to do that and how we can promote it. I think the most fascinating thing for me was just that consumers 72% prefer the online channel for wine sales. So I think that's definitely the direction it's going. And China in general, the landscape being so different to Australia, everything's online, isn't it? So
Yeah, absolutely.
definitely the way to go.
Yeah, and like it maybe not something that brands hope for, but unfortunately, I guess it's just the new cultural and the habits that these consumers are getting. It's sometimes we just have to see what we can do to navigate that.
Exactly. So thank you again for a wonderful seminar, and we'll sign in again next Friday.
Thank you.